So, hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of AzBytes. Something a little bit different for you guys today. With me, as always, is my trusted colleague Ty Parkin. Say hello, Ty.
Hi, everyone.
And today we've got the amazing Gary Smith, all the way from Ensono, some fantastic Microsoft partner. Gary's VP of Cloud Consultancy and Delivery, and today he's going to help us break down the magical world of merger and acquisitions, M&As. So I think what we'll do, we'll just jump straight on in. I know, Gary, you've got some really good information that you're going to help us try and digest a little bit now. But look, can we start from the point of, my personal experience working with customers at the moment, really around, that due diligence that IT folks need to do with the business when it comes to thinking about those mergers and acquisitions. Have you got any thoughts or, ideas around, some good pros on that side of the thing, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Due diligence is one of those things that you really hope would happen pre-acquisition, pre-merger. Not always possible. But it's important nonetheless, right? So really important that you understand, the landscape, you understand the applications, you understand the security posture, you understand the compliance implications. And really at that due diligence phase, you're looking to identify the potential risks. So legacy systems, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, hidden costs, those sort of things. So super important.
Cool. So that's the first top tip, I suppose, Gary. The second one that I'm interested in is what would you recommend around planning and prioritization? So I know that a lot of customers sort of struggle with that as well.
Yeah, again, super important to get this right. One of the things that we would sort of advise is try not to boil the ocean, right? Break it down into what you actually want to achieve in the short term, understand what you need in the medium term, and then your longer term strategy. For instance, collaboration from day one. How can you get people talking, working together, having a common workspace, those sort of things. So think about that. And then follow that up with a kind of a roadmap for your integration, right? So what are your strategic priorities? How do you meet those? Cost is always going to be in there somewhere, right? So think about that. How do you rationalize your estate? How do you remove duplication, consolidate resources, do all that sort of stuff? Generally speaking, just in the first phase, go after the things that's going to give you the best bang for buck in the shortest amount of time is what I would say.
Amazing. Thank you, John.
That's really, really good tips there. I think, it's certainly resonating with a lot of the conversation I've been having. One of the things that comes up a lot in my experience is really, M&As are really complex and, there's many ways of doing, varying different complicated elements to the project. Have you worked with, or what are your thoughts on standardizations or any particular patterns that you've come across? Is there anything along those lines you'd recommend, Gary?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? So particularly when you're talking with organizations that are highly acquisitive or are going to have multiple acquisitions or a part of that process. So what we would say is actually try and look to standardize across the board as much as you can, right? So what are the common items you see across multiple acquisitions? And then see how you can template those so you can roll them out really, really quickly. Apply that logic across things like your collaboration tools, your Azure infrastructure, your migration approach, build some standards around that. Everything's going to be a little bit different, but at least if you've got some standards and templates, it kind of gives you a little bit of a quick start, bit of an accelerator. We actually talk in terms sometimes of saying to people, try and build out your own internal mergers and acquisitions as a service, right? So if you think about it like that, apply it to your people, your process, your technology, it kind of gives you a format and a framework in order to accelerate some of these acquisitions. So that's what I was saying on that one.
Yeah, no, amazing stuff. Thanks, Gary.
Brilliant. So with every positive, there's always a negative. And unfortunately, with IT mergers and acquisitions, there's organizations that fall into the similar traps time and time again. What would you say the top one is in your perspective, Gary, or what do you see a lot of?
Top one, there's a lot, right? As you would expect. So I've got the scars of doing this from all sides of the world, from being acquired by being part of an acquiring organization, being part of a partner, helping with the integrations, those sort of things. So there are lots of different areas to look at depending on where you are. I think the first one, the most common one, is really hidden technical debt. legacy systems. So you think about things like applications with undocumented code. We see that a lot. Unpatched or out-of-date operating systems. Again, we see a lot of that. There's other things as well, such as licensing agreements, right? You may be locked into a particular entity that is not transferable, and suddenly you've got additional cost on your hand through licensing, right? And there's not a lot of value in duplicating those licensing. So I would say that hidden technical debt, legacy systems is probably the first one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think again resonate with some of these as well from my own personal experience, Gary. It's really great to understand these gotchas. They kind of help businesses who have not done this thing before to kind of start to align to some of those things and understand it. So, in terms of the complexity, of the sheer complexity of some of these acquisitions and mergers, have you got any kind of gotchas that you've experienced around that and ways to think things through, maybe?
Yeah, complexity. I mean, you're absolutely right. So some of these can be highly complex. One of the things that is probably underestimated is data migration and the impact on compliance, those sort of areas. So if you're merging your CRM, your ERP, HR systems, those sort of things, you've really got to get that right, because you don't want to be corrupting data on the way through. So think about those in those sort of terms. Also, if you think about compliance as well, if you're subject to GDPR, HIPAA, SOX, any of those really, you can give yourself some issues if things like data residency, access controls, retention of audit logs, if they're not aligned across the two organizations, then you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So I would say, yeah, complexity, data migration, compliance.
Good stuff. Thanks, Gary.
That's really good. And generally speaking, Gary, with any IT or organizational change of any type, there's always a drive between people, process, and technology. We've covered process and technology a little bit before in conversation. What about people and culture? What would you like to highlight in this area?
Definitely worth mentioning, right? Personally speaking, I don't think it gets enough airtime. We're technologists. We'd love working in the technology, but it's people that use the technology that is important, right? So when you're bringing organizations together, you do have to think about the different IT cultures. Right? And when we talk about that with things like on-prem versus cloud-first strategies, we're thinking things like agile versus waterfall in projects, different cybersecurity postures. All these things can clash and slow down your integration. So consider those sort of things. And you're right, people, process, and technology, people is at the front of that, right? So we should be thinking about that. I would say, or advise anybody going through this, develop your internal champions, the people that are going to advocate for this change, that are going to smooth the water. Avoid using divisive language, us, them, they. You're all part of a single organization now. Sort of work with that. Anecdotally, many years ago, I was working for an organization that was acquired, and we ended up introducing the swear box of all things, right? It was like anytime you mentioned the organization that had been acquired that was no longer in existence, you had to put a little bit of money in the swear box. So I don't know whether it helped or not, but it sort of focused the mind on the intent. So yeah, that's probably that one.
And I'm assuming a brilliant Christmas party from it as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it ramped up quickly in the first instance, and after the first couple of weeks, yeah, it started to dry up a little bit as people started to understand what we were doing. But yeah,
brilliant.
No, I think that honestly, Gary, really top tips there. I think, anybody watching this video, if you've got any thoughts or comments or, on the approaches Gary's mentioned, please drop them in the comments below. But look, I think we'll draw this to a close now. We, have 10, 15 minutes or so talking about mergers and acquisitions. Folks watching, if you want to find out more, I'll drop some links to Ensono and to Gary's contacts in the description below. So please feel free to reach out to Gary, feel free to reach out to myself or Ty, and we can pick up the conversation. But look, leaves me last thing to say, but Ty, great to see you as always on these episodes, and Gary, thank you for being such an awesome guest on this episode.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody for watching.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and click that bell notification so you don't miss any more future episodes of AzBytes. See you on the next one. Bye.
Cheers,
for now.
Bye.
Cheers.